Hello class, let's discuss about key literary terms. When we say literary terms, we refer to the technique, style, and formatting used by writers and speakers to emphasize or strengthen their compositions. Let's begin by defining what these two terms are. First, we have the fiction and then the non-fiction. When we say fiction, this is any narrative which does not contain facts or real events. Rather, it is based on imagination. For example, we have folk tales, fairy tales, and so on. Then we have non-fiction that implies that form of prose which discusses true events, facts, and information. Examples for this one are biographies, autobiographies, newspapers, reference books, magazines, and the like. Now let's move on to the three main divisions of literature. We have prose, poetry, and drama. I'm very sure that you are already familiar with it, but let's just have a quick review. So for prose, this is any writing that is not poetry. It is written in sentences and paragraphs. For examples are essays, short stories, novels, newspaper articles, and letters. Then we have poetry. This is a beautiful thought, image, or emotion, often expressed in rhythmical language and often written according to patterns of lines. So let me just have a compare and contrast between prose and poetry. In terms of the form, prose is written in paragraph form while poetry is written in verse form. In terms of language use, prose uses normal language, and then poetry uses figurative language such as literary devices like simile, metaphor, hyperbole, and the like. And then last one, we have drama, which is written by a playwright and tells a group of actors what to do or say on stage. And this one is performed before an audience. Next, let's have the term plot. So when we say plot, this is the structure of interrelated actions consciously selected and arranged by the author. So we have the five elements: the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So for exposition, this is where the characters are introduced. This is where you can find the setting, and this one gives us a basic information about the story. For rising action, this is where the reader is introduced to the conflict of the main characters. And then for climax, this is the turning point of the story, and it is where the most exciting part of the story transpires. For falling action, this is where all of the actions occur after the climax and before the conclusion of the story. For resolution, there might not be a clear resolution because there is what we call cliffhanging ending. So, in addition to that, this is also called denoma, or the event that happens at the end to help us solve the conflict. Now, let's have conflict. Conflict is a struggle between opposing forces, and it can be problems and complications in the story. We have two types: the internal and external conflict. Under internal conflict, we have man versus himself. This is a conflict within the character. This is where, for example, a character is contemplating or reflecting upon himself. He or she is like talking to himself, wondering if he would do the right or the wrong. And then we have external conflict. This is a struggle with an outside force or problem. Under it, we have man versus man. This is a character against a character. And then man versus society. This is a character against a social issue or problem in society. And then man versus nature. This is a character against an element or an animal. And then lastly, man versus supernatural. This is a character against ghosts, fantasies, and etc. Now let's talk about characters. When we say character, this is a person or animal that takes part in the action of a literary work. For types, we have round, dynamic, flat, and static. For round, this is diverse, well developed, with several character traits. For dynamic, it undergoes a change of some kind of personality, thoughts, or beliefs by the end of the story. An example of a dynamic character is the Beast from The Beauty and the Beast, because this character is portrayed to be a harsh one. But after meeting Belle, the princess, his feelings started to slowly change, not only for Belle, but also for those characters around him. And then let's have the flat character. This is a type of character in fiction that does not change too much from the start of the narrative to its end. Let me give you an example of a flat character. If you have watched the movie Romeo and Juliet, or if ever you have read about the play, a flat character there is Juliet's mother, because we hardly know anything about her, and her sole purpose is to just try to convince Juliet to marry Paris. Another one from Disney is Ariel from The Little Mermaid. I know she's the protagonist and main focus of the story, but her character is flat due to her unwavering obsession with what dwells above the surface of the ocean, and it's just all she ever thinks about. And then let's have static. This is a character that never changes personality, thoughts, or beliefs, hence the term static. An example of a static character is Cinderella. I know she is again a protagonist, but she is a static character because she remains friendly, honorable, positive, and kind despite being orphaned and abused by her stepmother and stepsisters. In addition to character, we have the character roles in stories, beginning with protagonist. So, protagonist is the leading character or one of the major characters in a drama, movie, novel, or other fictional text. Next, we have the antagonist. The antagonist is a character or force in conflict with the main character or protagonist. So the character antagonist is the one making conflict with the main character or the protagonist. And then we also have love interest. The love interest is the protagonist's object of desire. If you have watched also The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, Daisy was Gatsby's love object of desire. And then we have confidant. This type of character is the best friend or sidekick of the protagonist, or like the Sancho Panza to their Don Quixote. Often, the protagonist's goal flows through the confidant, although not every story needs one. Next, we have the deuteragonist. This character often overlaps with confidants. A deuteragonist is close to the main character, but the story's main plot does not directly correspond with their own character arc. Next, we have the tertiary characters. Tertiary characters populate the world of the story but do not necessarily linked to the main storyline. These minor characters serve any number of functions and may have varying degrees of personal dynamism. Now let's have the last one, the foil. A foil character primarily exists to bring the protagonist's qualities into sharper relief. This is because the foil is effectively the opposite of the protagonist. Now let's have the point of view. When we say point of view, this is the perspective or vantage point from which a story is told. It is the relationship of the narrator of the story. We have three types: the first person, second person, and then the third person. Let's go first with the first person. It is told by a character who uses the first person pronoun I, and narrator is in the story. So, in the first person point of view, we are seeing events through the eyes of the character telling the story. For a second person point of view, the narrator is speaking to us or to you. We see this mostly in poems, speeches, and articles. For third person POV, we have the third person limited and the third person omniscient. For third person limited, the storyteller lets us know thoughts and feelings of just one character in a story. Usually it is the protagonist. For third person omniscient, the storyteller lets us know thoughts and feelings of all the characters in the story. So when we say omniscient, it means to know everything. Now let's move on to setting. This is the time and place of a story. It can also include all the details of a place and time, the year, the time of the day, it's even the weather. The place may be a specific country, state, region, community, neighborhood, building, institution, or home. Now let's have symbol or symbolism. Symbols are objects that carry meanings or represent ideas. However, symbols can also take the form of words, images, colors, or even actions. Let's have an example. Brides wear white because white symbolizes purity. So we have colors as a symbol. Next, snakes often symbolize evil or corruption. So there are other symbols that we are using in literature aside from those that have been mentioned. Next, we have the theme. So the theme is a central unifying idea. It's the bigger issue that emerges as the characters pursue their goals. So this one is often asked after a literary piece or a story has been read to you. So when we say theme, this is the central idea of the story. It can be expressed as a general statement about people or life. But take note that this is not a plot summary. Example of a theme statement is, let's get it from the story The Three Little Pigs. So the theme there is hard work and sacrifice and effort pay off in the end of the story. So that is an example of a theme statement from the story. Now let's have moral. Moral is a message or a recommendation for how to live. They can be useful for children who need guidance and simplicity to make sense of the world. So basically, moral is a lesson to be learned. It is like we are teaching the readers a specific behavior, attitude, and an important life lesson that they should not forget. So, example in the story The Lion and the Mouse, the moral there is An act of kindness is never wasted. This is because in the story, the lion spares the mouse when she captures her, and the mouse tells him that if he sets her free, then she will find a way to repay him. Maybe you are quite confused with what theme and moral is. So for theme, just like what I've said earlier, theme is the subject matter of discussion in the story, whereas moral is a lesson that a story conveys. Now let's have imagery. So when we say imagery, this is a word or phrase that appeal to one or more of the five senses. Writers use imagery to describe how their subjects look, sound, feel, taste, and smell. So we have some examples here for the sense of sight, touch, sound, taste, and smell. Another example is this: the family dinner was a combination of boisterous conversation, badly burnt chicken, and the scent of freshly baked bread. From that statement, we can already see and imagine how the family dinner went. Now let's have denotation and connotation. So this is in terms of meaning in literature. So while denotation is the literal meaning of the word, connotation is a feeling or an indirect meaning. Okay? So let's have an example for this one to differentiate the two. So when we say denotation for the word blue, we mean this is a color, because in denotation, it also means the dictionary meaning of a particular word. So in denotation, blue means a color. But in a connotation, since this one is expressed indirectly, it could mean that it is a feeling of being sad. For example, in a sentence, Carlo is feeling blue, meaning he is feeling very sad. Another example is the word hot. When we say hot in denotation, it is a temperature above the human temperature. But in connotation, if we say hot, it could mean a lot of things. It depends on the culture of the people. So when we say, oh, she's hot, it doesn't mean that she has a temperature higher than the human temperature. It means that she is beautiful, sexy, and modest, just like that. Now let's have idioms. An idiom is an expression or phrase whose meaning does not relate to the literal meaning of its words. In other words, idioms mean something different than the individual words. For example, we have the common ones: it's raining cats and dogs, meaning it's raining very hard. Oh, it's just a piece of cake, meaning it is very easy. For example, in this slide, money doesn't grow on trees. So when your parents would tell you this, it means that you have to be very careful in spending your money because money is limited. Another example here, we have boil the ocean, meaning taking up an almost impossible or overly ambitious project. Another, keep an ear to the ground, meaning staying informed and updated about everything. And eat like a horse, meaning to eat too much or excessively. So those are some examples of idioms. There are actually a lot, and if you really want to, get to know Americans, you have to study about idioms because they often use this one when they are conversing with people. Now let's have some literary devices. I know you are already familiar with this one: simile. So when we say simile, this is another figure of speech that compares seemingly unlike things. Similes do use the words like, as, than, or resembles. For example, her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. So what are we trying to compare here? So we are trying to compare her voice to the nails on a chalkboard. So it's actually unpleasant to our ears if this one happens. Another example is she laughed like a hyena. So imagine the laugh of a hyena. So there, those are examples of simile. Now let's have metaphor. A metaphor is a type of speech that compares or equates two or more things that have something in common. So, in contrast with simile, metaphor does not use like or as. It is being told directly without using like or as. Example, life is a bowl of cherries, meaning life is full of pleasure. So that's for metaphor. Now let's have personification. In personification, we are giving human attributes to any objects or animals. For example, the chair held to me and rocked back and forth. So the chair is being given human attributes. So that's for personification. Now let's have alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words. Alliteration gives emphasis to words. So, true alliteration is either three or more words with the same consonant sounds together or close by. Two words can be alliteration, but it's better when the two words are names such as Mickey Mouse or Minnie Mouse. So, let's have an example here. Take Tommy to the train station today. So, what is the consonant sounds being repeated or being emphasized? So, we have the consonant sound T. Okay. Now, let's have onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the sound that is being described, or this can be a word given to the sound something makes. For example, we have here the roar coming from lions, and then hiccups from probably mouse, buzz from the bees, and the like. Let's also have hyperbole. This is an exaggeration, often an extreme exaggeration. This can be used to add humor or for dramatic effects. This is also used to emphasize a point. So let's have an example here. I will literally die if you don't stop using hyperboles incorrectly. Another one. I would crab crawl across a desert for you. So just imagine if a person does that. So it's really an exaggeration. Another, I laughed my head off, meaning you are laughing so loud that you get your head off. So those are just example of exaggerations. Now let's have the oxymoron. Oxymoron is a figure of speech that is a combination of seemingly contradictory words. Example, same difference. So these two words are completely opposite. We have the same and then we have the difference. Synonym and then antonym. And then we also have pretty ugly, roaring silence, or deafening silence. So we are combining two words that are completely opposite or contradictory. Next, let's have allusion. An allusion is a figure of speech that makes a reference to people, places, events, or literary works directly or by implying them. So there's a lot of allusion mentioned in mythology and the Bible, which we often use in the modern world. For example, In the story of Pinocchio, if someone has told you that, oh, you're like Pinocchio, meaning you are also lying, or it indicates that your nose is like getting bigger, meaning you are not telling the truth. Another one in mythology is the Trojan horse. So it's like if something is told to be a Trojan horse, meaning it just looks decent and innocent on the outside, but there's a hidden purpose behind those beautiful creations. Another example also in Bible is the Garden of Eden pertaining to sometimes describing places. So that's for allusion. Now let's have the irony. This is a statement, action, or situation that is the opposite of what it normally means or what is expected. You would often hear the statement, how ironic. Oh, it's ironic, meaning it's contradictory. So, what you expect to happen does not really happen. So, we have three types: the verbal, situational, and dramatic irony. Let's have first the verbal irony. So, in here, we say the opposite of what is being meant. For example, oh, you're looking very nice today with those clothes on. So sometimes it's not really true because what you meant is different from what you say. What about situational irony? So this is something that happens which is the opposite of what is expected. So let's have an example. For example, in a court, there is a couple who wants to get divorced and want their marriage to be annulled. So, at the end of the hearing, of course, you would expect them being divorced. But in the end, they actually ended remarrying each other. So, that is an example of situational irony. You expect the situation to happen like this, but it turns out differently. Last one, we have the dramatic irony. The reader knows something a character doesn't know. This usually happens in movies. If you've watched the Romeo and Juliet, there is the scene in the dying scene of the couple where Romeo thought that Juliet is already dead when in fact the viewers knew that she's not because she has just um she has just drank this. I don't know what that term is called, but it would make her asleep for quite some time so that it would appear that she is already dead. But Romeo does not know about this. The viewers or the readers would only know about this one. So it's an example of dramatic irony. The viewers know about the situation, but the character in the story does not. So that's for the irony. Now let's have flashback. Flashback is literary device in which an earlier episode, conversation, or event is inserted into the sequence of events. Often, flashbacks are presented as a memory of the narrator or of another character. This is very helpful because it would connect the present situation to the past one. Now let's have the foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is the author's use of clues to hint at what might happen later in the story. Writers use foreshadowing to build their readers' expectations and to create suspense as well. This is used to help readers prepare for what is to come. For example, the movie Final Destination, where a certain character has been shown what is going to happen. So it gives clue and hints to the readers and viewers as well. Now let's have the term suspense. Suspense is the growing interest and excitement readers experience while awaiting a climax or resolution in a work of literature. It is a feeling of anxious uncertainty about the outcome of events. Writers create suspense by raising questions in the minds of their readers. So, this is what you really feel when you are reading, for example, a horror story or an adventure one. So it's like it's giving you either an excitement or an anxious feeling about what is going to happen on what you are reading or watching. Now let's have motive. A motive is a recurring symbol throughout literature that helps develop them. A motive can be a word, image, sound, character, archetype, and etc. For example, in the Disney movies, the motif of Disney is always a wicked stepmother. So that's an example of a motif. Now let's have inference. Inference is a conclusion derived from facts or evidence, making an educated guess based on what you have read, learned, or know. So while reading a story, you may be able to infer something about the character based on what you have read in regards to his action, thoughts, viewpoints of others, and etc. So while you are reading, I guess you have also experienced making an inference about a certain character that you would come to an inference that this character would later become an evil because of this, because of a particular situation on what you have read in that particular story. So that's for inference. Now let's have paradox. A paradox is a juxtaposition of contrasting ideas that, while seemingly impossible, actually reveals a deeper truth. So, when you read a particular statement in a paradox, it would seem really impossible, contradictory, but it really suggests something deeper in meaning. So, example, if I know one thing, it's that I know nothing. Another one. This is the beginning of the end. So it seems contradictory in the first look, in the first read, but at the end it suggests something deeper. So, in addition, paradox reveals something through which at first seems contradictory. So, those are just examples. Next, we have euphemism. It's a polite word or phrase used in place of one that may be too direct, unpleasant, or embarrassing. So, in euphemism, we are trying to like sugarcoat our words so it would not sound really harsh. For example, in a particular company, the boss would say or would like to address the employee as someone that he wants to fire in the company. So instead of saying you're fired, he would rather say, okay, I've got to let you go. So that's actually a soft blow, but it is what it is. Another example of words in euphemism are the following: pass away, meaning to die, because when you say die, it's actually like a something that is quite harsh, especially if you are telling this one to someone who has just lost his or her loved ones. So you would maybe want to use pass away instead of the word die. It depends on the context of the situation. Another, we have vertically challenged, pertaining to short people, tooted to farted, let go to fired, pre-owned, or meaning used. So there are actually like a lot of examples. Those are just few. And then we have the cliche. This one is an overused expression which is lifeless and generic from excessive use. So this is actually words or statements that have been repeatedly said in the society or in a particular situation. For example, driving me crazy. Oh, this one is driving me crazy. You often hear these words from movies. Another, when pigs fly, meaning it will be impossible to happen or it will never happen. Another one, cold as ice. And then don't judge a book by its cover. So these are just statements that have been repeatedly used by speakers, and it's very generic for its excessive use. Last one, we have the word pun. So pun is a play on the multiple meanings of a word or on two words that sound alike but have different meanings. For example, this is a humorous example of a pun. What has four wheels and flies? Answer, a garbage truck. So that I know that's not really funny, but for some places it is, especially if it's something that is applying to friends, having a good time to each other. Another example in literature, John Milton, who is a very famous author. So here, why is John Milton terrible to invite to game night? The answer, because when he's around, there's a pair of dice lost. So pairs of dice lost is actually meaning it is the Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is his composition, a very famous one. Okay, another example, frog barking only, all others will be toad. So we have the term frog and then toad. So the author is really witty in creating these ones. Another, let's talk about it. So we have here the image of a taco with the ellipsis, which suggests he's selling something. Last one, why are obtuse angles so depressed? Answer, because they're never right, because they're not a right angle. Okay, so that's pretty much it about this topic. So here are my references. I hope that you have gotten relevant information and lessons about our topic. That's it. Good day, everyone.